What was the biggest bullet you dodged? My dad was a truck driver in the oil field in Canada. He worked a lot of long hours and every single day, so on weekends he would bring me and my younger brother on some of his jobs. We were on location and my little brother, 3 years, and me, 10 years, were waiting for him playing in cab of truck. My little brother opened the passenger door and my little arms closed it. Job's done. We start our trek home going about 35 km/h and the door flies open and I get sucked out of the truck. I remember doing about 10 backflips as I tumbled out, hitting the ground on my back a few times and rolling my way to a stop. I stood up before the truck was even stopped in absolute shock. Next thing I see my dad looking for me and he burst into tears. First time I ever seen him cry. I'm 33 now and he still won't talk to me about it. Luckily the rig was in a farmer's field, so when we were leaving I landed on softer dirt. Not a single scratch on me. Dad thought he ran over me with trailer. Don't think we ever went to work with dad again. I work for the company now. A few years ago I had pneumonia, but my whole family insisted that it was just postnasal drip, which runs in the family. After a week or two I woke up in the middle of the night when I couldn't feel my arm. After I got to the doctor said that it was the worst he'd ever seen and he was surprised I wasn't dead. I had 3 pounds of mucus cut out of my lungs and another 2 weeks in the hospital siphoning out the rest. For 3 months afterwards I could barely walk half a mile without starting to pass out and I still can't run for more than 200-300 yards without collapsing. Around £30,000. I was driving with my wife in town one snowy evening and we had pulled up to a stoplight. I happened to glance up at the rear view mirror and saw a city bus heading towards us and rotating sideways. I hit the gas and pulled ahead into the intersection and left into the turning lane. And less than a second later, the bus went sliding through right where our car was. It came to a stop on the other side of the intersection and fortunately didn't hit anything, but 1 second or 2 feet difference and we would have had some nice spinal injuries. I once took care of a couple in a rehab facility who was in the accident that you narrowly avoided. Bus on a snowy road slid into them at an intersection. They had matching spinal cord injuries that resulted in them both being paralyzed from the waist down. You're really lucky. Many years ago, my flight had just landed at Chicago O'Hare and the plane was taxiing when the pilot suddenly slammed on the brakes. People were literally thrown forward against the seat in front of them. A few seconds later, another plane, taking off I think, went screaming by right in front of us. No explanation was given, though our imaginations provided a lot of gory details. Just regular Chicago drivers. As a kid, after running errands in town with my mom, I was climbing into the backseat of our family station wagon. A semi-truck hit a power line pole down the street causing the still live wire to fall, bounce off the roof of the car and hang across the open door just a foot or two above my legs. Raised Catholic, I wondered for a while after if I had actually died that day and that the rest of what I thought was my life was my purgatory. Poor you as a kid. I often had a particular nightmare about the apocalypse and doomsday when I was little because the church talked about the end of days and the second coming of God. I had an aunt who would make us watch movies about such topics. I sometimes still have that dream, always the same dream since I was little. Years ago I lived in Vancouver and liked to go for long walks. Beautiful city to do so. I was heading to a friend's first to drop something off and cut through a neighborhood with a lot of Southeast Asian immigrants. The ones I got to talk to were mostly from Vietnam. I was aware of a van behind me but it was midday and there were people out, so it was only a passing thought. A lady was working in her garden and as I approached her house she started to look behind me. Then she came out onto the sidewalk and started talking to me in her native language. I understood none of it but her body language was agitated. She kept gesturing to me to come with her up their walkway. As I look behind me I see 3 men getting out of the van, which is now parked just behind me. By this point the woman has a good grip on my arm and has me dragged almost to her porch. She kept talking to me and pointing to stuff in her garden and I just listened, nodded, and kept a good eye on the men and van. I don't remember how long we were there but the men finally left. Both myself and the woman let out huge sighs of relief. She then patted me on the arm, said something, and then went back to her gardening. I booted it to my friend's house. On the news the next day was the story of a woman who was kidnapped and gang rape. The victim was grabbed on the next street over from the woman's house, not long after my encounter with her, by 5 men in a van. The men were distinctive and the description of the men and van fit the ones I had seen. That woman saved me from something horrible and I am forever thankful. A friend had lost his job under suspicious circumstances. A few weeks later he asked me to take him to the bank. As I got near to pick him up I caught a train. He called to say never mind, he would get someone else. A few days later a friend sent out a message to a large number of our friends. This guy lost his job and was running a check cashing con. Can you cash this check for me? I'll pay you $50 if you do. The check is $500. He has no backing funds. You eat the whole amount. He did this to several friends in a few days to amass a few grand and was about to skip town when the cops got him. Halfway through this I was thinking you dodged being an unknown getaway driver for a bank robbery. Not me, but I had a field service engineer working on one of my big robotic liquid handlers. He decided to bypass the safety pin that prevents the heads from moving while the cover is open while he had a diagnostic program queued up on the computer. What he didn't know was that the instant he reinserted the safety pin the machine would execute the queued instructions and start moving. And he had a hand inside it right in the danger zone. I grabbed his shoulder and yanked his hand out an instant before it was crushed. He stopped ignoring me when I told him to stop bypassing safety lockouts to save a few minutes. Whoa, I'm sure this guy isn't completely responsible for you guys putting a safety system in place, but it sounds like he certainly had a hand in it. My newborn needed to be rushed to a super high level NICU to be put into a state of induced hypothermia because he only had hours before he would suffer permanent brain damage. I live in a small town in the middle of nowhere. The small town next door just barely upgraded their hospital to have that hypothermia suite, one of only a few in Texas. He's doing great, no sign of any damage. Our daughter is a NICU baby too. The only piece of unsolicited advice I will ever give expecting parents is when you're checking out hospitals, make sure to check out the NICU and select a hospital with a good one. You probably won't need it, but if you do you'll be happy it's there. Daughter is 4 now and a healthy little spitfire. Glad your son is too. I stayed up all night before a day trip to Hong Kong. You know that days when you haven't slept, you're just kinda robotic and doing the human stuff. Nearly zero awareness of anything? Well, I went to cross a street and my friend behind me snatched my shoulder and yanked me backwards just in time to feel the whoosh of a double-decker bus breezing past us. I just looked at him like, oh, thanks man, and it took a whole extra minute for my brain to process I would be fucking dead had he not grabbed me. Hubs, my sister, and I were hanging out around my parents' house on a very boring 4th of July. We decided to wash my husband's new car sitting in the driveway because it was hot out and an excuse to play in the hose. We were literally walking out the front door, and I said, hey, we should eat lunch before we get all wet and stuff. And everyone agreed, so we turned around and went back inside. I was warming up something in the microwave. A Hot Pocket I think. And all of a sudden I hear the loudest bang I think I've ever heard. From the direction of the front door. Hubs and I look at each other wide-eyed and run outside. I was greeted by the back end of a Crown Vic, smoking something fierce, plowed into the tree in the middle of our yard. For a split second I was just stunned, then screamed to my sister inside to call 911. I looked over to the driveway, at the car we had been planning to wash just 5 minutes ago. Totaled. Completely totaled. Brand new 2011 G6. Destroyed. Guy hit it so hard it did a complete 90-degree turn across the driveway. He actually hit it so hard, it ended up ricocheting and hitting the other cars in the driveway, mauling 2 other cars. Yard was fricked. Crown Vic was fricked. Tree was fricked. We immediately assumed it was drunk driving. Being the 4th and all, I went over to the driver's side and found a very old man, very bewildered, unable to comprehend what I was saying but conscious. I will never forget the look he gave me. Confused, helpless, scared. I was on the line with the paramedics as they sent over the ambulances and tried my best to follow their instructions. My sister was only 14 at the time, so I handled the call, Turns out dude was diabetic and had passed out behind the wheel due to low blood sugar, hit the gas pedal with his weight as he passed out, and was plowing down our residential street at about 65 miles per hour. He jumped the curb, drove down the sidewalk past another house, then slammed into my husband's car, and subsequently, the tree. If we had been anywhere near that yard driveway, I have no doubt one or all of us would have been seriously injured or dead. It was sheer dumb luck and timing that saved us. Huge bullet dodged, or should I say, huge car dodged. I will never judge myself for craving Hot Pockets again. One day, they just might save my life. Was going to move to a different apartment complex last month. Got injured at work and lost hours. Therefore, couldn't come up with the deposit money in time. Last week summer chat was cooking and caught the building on fire. Thank God username doesn't check out. I survived a rocket attack that landed about 10 meters from me, very close to where we were standing. We were so close to the launch site that the warning alarm came after the rocket had already impacted. Thankfully, we were able to dive under a vehicle for some shelter and the three of us made it through unscathed. I can answer this in a little way. When I was a child, I was playing video games with my little brother. Well, he found our dad's gun and fired it. No one was hurt, but it scared the crap out of me. My younger brother used to dry fire guns at me, till one time he fired a live one right by my head. Dad came home and wondered why he had a huge, black eye. Had a teacher in high school who was wicked sarcastic and witty, while also being a hard butt grader. To me, the perfect teacher. Class was challenging but we were all laughing and having a good time. He was a great mentor and I continued to visit his class even after I graduated. One time, post-graduation, I was sitting in his office and I had just given him some art to decorate his classroom with and he was so excited he blurted, "I could kiss you." Something about the intense eye contact unsettled me, but I laughed it off. 17-year-old girl, what can I say? Couple months later, he was arrested for having a sexual relationship with an underage student. I'm sorry but I chuckled at how he tried to ease it in that way. It sounded so awkward the way you put it. I interviewed for a job that I wanted desperately in August 2019. After the initial phone interview, I went in for an in-person interview at 4 PM on a Wednesday. I had a rejection in my inbox by 8 PM and was completely gutted. Then 2020 happened, and they laid off 60% of their staff and will probably go under. I'm thankful for that rejection every day. I needed this perspective. I'm currently in agony waiting to hear the results of 2 interviews for different places. I'd be thrilled with either job, but gotta remind myself that if neither pan out, well, maybe I dodged a bullet. When my great aunt passed away I was helping to clean out her house. I'm just dragging everything out of the basement and suddenly my dad is like, "Whoa, put that down gently and let's move away from here." So I put the weird metal tube type thing I'm carrying down and get out of there. Turns out it's a mortar shell from when my aunt worked in a munitions factory during World War II. Bomb squad came and took it away. My mother left me in one state and went back to my abusive stepfather. She tried to get me to drop out of my senior year at HS, move back to their state and just get my GED. They wanted a live-in babysitter, cook and maid. I was so lucky my grandparents let me move in with them and finish school. It's always the grandparents that are the true homies. My high school sweetheart and fiance was my bullet. He ghosted me out of nowhere, no explanation, just gone. So needless to say, no wedding. I sent the ring back to his mom cause I didn't want it and was pee. I go on to live a great life, find a wonderful guy and we have been happily married for 21 years. 25 years later I find out that my old flame had been arrested for underage solicitation, sexting underage girls, possession of child pee, and many charges of sex with minors. Apparently Mr. Big Man in his community was arrested in a sting operation after this 12-year-old girl's parents found a whole series of explicit texts and had found that he set up a romantic hotel room get-together for them. Police pretended to be her and he was caught in the parking lot of the hotel. Even better, he was married to the same chick he was apparently seeing while we were together, and had a couple of kids, all around the same age of his victims. Yeah, before finding all this out, I regretted for a long time that we didn't work. After finding out this had been going on for at least 20 years, I was rather glad I got ghosted. Never been so glad to dodge a bullet. My high school sweetheart ended up marrying the girl he dated after me. He was the murderer in their murder-suicide several years later. I don't necessarily feel like that could have been me, but I do wonder how different our lives would have been if I'd stayed with him. This was years ago, but I'm still very sad for him that he felt whatever led him to do this. Freshman year of college, I had a calc class. It was material I had learned before, but for various reasons they didn't give me transfer credit, so I skipped class quite frequently. Though I usually slept in, one morning I find myself awake at 8:30 and not really feeling like sleep. Might as well check in on the class and see what's going on. It was the midterm exam. As a chronic procrastinator, I've been there, but I've also noticed it a day too late, and that feels bad, man. Not my story, but a girl I knew had had a few drinks and decided to hitchhike home, a town about 40 minutes away from the one she'd been drinking in. Note it is very common for people to hitchhike in this area. She gets picked up by a car of guys. All seems fine until she points out they can drop her off just up ahead, and they keep driving. She had that instant sober feeling. She plays it off like she's clueless and totally down to keep hanging out with them, acting like she's very drunk. Meanwhile, they're back in more forested area of the highway. Then she fake dry heaves and says she about to puke, really putting on a show, so they stop to let her out. She books it into the bushes and just doesn't look back until she's safe. When I was in high school, we had a cop come talk to us about what to do if we were in the car with someone and things didn't feel right. They said to use the 3 P's and say you desperately gotta puke, gotta pee, or gotta poop, and the sucker more often than not cares more about their car getting soiled than whatever they wanted to do to you, and will let you out. Getting chased by someone with a knife across my apartment. I closed my door at the right moment, so that person ended up stabbing my wooden door instead. The mark was there until I left the apartment a few years later as a constant reminder of what could have been. At 17 I met and married a sweet little North Carolina daddy's girl. Had I not, I would have still been hanging with my friends that just discovered H. Of the 3 friends, 2 are dead and 1 did 10 years in prison. Everyone I used to know, including family members, got into H. I loved to party and had done all the drugs with them up to the point of H, and probably would have got into it too if it weren't for my GF at the time forbidding me from it. Thank God I loved her more than drugs to listen to her. A lot of them are dead. My sister and the rest of them are locked up. I had a cardiac arrest about 4 years ago. Dropped dead-ish in the middle of my shift. Found out after I woke up about a week later that A. The manager who saw me fall was a former lifeguard and knew proper CPR. B. An ambulance happened to be passing about 2 blocks away. C. Probably the best cardio unit in my state was a 10-minute ambulance ride from where it all happened. Walked out of the hospital about 2 weeks later. Full recovery. Almost proposed to a girl who had been cheating on me with a pile of crap that called himself my best friend. This was years ago, and I'm getting married at the end of the month to the love of my life. Life has a way of working itself out. I'm glad you got out of that situation. Congratulations on getting married. My great-grandfather was in the merchant navy in the war. He was in the engine room at the bottom of the ship, and his friend came down to take over the shift early. Minutes later, a torpedo struck and everyone at the bottom of the ship couldn't escape and died. My great-grandfather would have been one of them otherwise. Then, he was in the sea for a while and happened to be picked up by some Portuguese fishermen who saved him. Then, all part of the same tale, he escaped death again. He was meant to be on a flight back to the UK, but got kicked off last minute to be replaced by VIPs. That plane got shot down and everyone died in it. Miss you, great-grandpa X. Death was like, nope. My dad was going through severe depression 10 years ago, and my life was equally crappy for a whole multitude of reasons, and it was rubbing off on me. I spent what felt like half an hour crying on the floor and working up the nerve to pull the trigger. Then when I finally did, the safety was on. I sold my gun the next morning. Wish my dad was able to say the same 3 years later. RIP. Really sorry to hear that, dude. Hope things get better for you. All my condolences go to you and your family. A literal police car. The police were chasing someone and I was crossing the road and my dumbass was walking slowly and the police car nearly grazed me. Look both ways and take off your headphones when you cross the road, kids. Look both ways and take off your headphones when you cross the road, kids. This can't be stated enough. And even if you have the right of way and will win any legal matter, I guarantee that won't mean crap to you when you're being peeled off the pavement. Studying video game development in college. Reading about the standard of living for those people and the horrific abusive practices in the industry made me realize I was totally right to just go with electrical engineering. Good move. I was once a game developer. That was sort of the peak of my programming career. I worked for a major dev house, on a game everybody has heard of, on a team with some of the biggest famous names in the industry. I went in thinking it was my dream job, only to find that it totally sucked. I wound up going back to school and becoming a nurse. This is lots better. 7.92 Mauser rifle bullet. When I was 15ish I was very depressed and got very drunk. Found my great grandfather's World War I captured German rifle. Found some bullets from that time, loaded it, and put the rifle in my mouth and pulled the trigger. Thankfully the bullet was not loaded properly, was a dud for being 90 years old at the time, and did not fire. You got extremely lucky. I am shooting 70-year-old ammo and it's very rare to have a dud. Glad you made it through. I think the intent was clear, but fixed it. My GF and I were going to see Cats, the movie. Our Uber pulls up and straight away we notice something about the driver. To this day, we can't articulate what it was, other than to say he just felt off. We got into his car, already hesitating and a touch anxious. He looks at us in the rear view mirror and makes a comment like "two lovely ladies in my car tonight" or some weird crap. A few minutes in, he makes another semi-sexual innuendo comment about riding with him. My friend notices the handle of a knife just poking out the side of his jacket. She says, "Hey, can we stop at 7-Eleven? We need to grab a Gatorade real quick." So we go in and refuse to come back out. We're considering whether to call the police or not. It was so creepy. But what would we say? Some dude was creepy to us. And while we're hesitating, he winds down his window, brandishes this freaking hunting knife at both of us, screams something about devil women and then just tears it out the parking lot. To this day, my GF and I are so thankful that we got out of that Uber. Otherwise we would have made it to the movies in time and we would have seen Cats. Hit me with a curveball there at the end. Bravo. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.